Today we talk about the game that comes with the last issue of the magazine Victis. The game is called Syracuse. It is based on the same system as Factera, which I played and reviewed recently. This game is still set in the Peloponnesian War. Now we have Athens that is fighting against Syracuse, that was an ally of Sparta, and now both sides are fighting to build fortifications to strangle the supplies of the opponent, and they're also fighting to defend the fortifications from the attacks of the opponent that will be trying to defend these supply lines. In this review, I'm going to gloss over the general ideas of the system, let's say the ideas that this game shares with Factera, so they can concentrate more on the new things, on the tweaks to the system that are added in this game, and also simply the new concepts that are presented in this game, such as fortifications, attrition, sieges, and things like that. You have the board, of course, which is a large board. It is twice as large as the map of Sphacteria, and I placed the map on a magnetic board, again, mainly because I wanted to have some room to create my own reinforcement track, because you have many reinforcements and, well, the turn track is really not large enough to hold them all. Like in Sphacteria, you start each turn by drawing two special event markers from a cup. These events may be spent later for their printed effect, which will grant different types of bonuses, but there's also a case in which you can simply burn a marker as a generic resource, ignoring the effect printed on the marker. This is very important because it gives you more flexibility than in Sphactera, where if you got stuck with markers that you did not need, there was nothing you could do with them. Now you can still use them even if you are not interested in using the specific effects. I like that a lot. Like in Sphacteria, you roll 2 dice to determine initiative, and the amount of that you rolled in the initiative roll also determines your action points for that turn, which is going to be half of your initiative roll, rounded up. But there are also going to be other modifiers here, because each turn lasts a full season, and you're gonna have an extra action point during summer and during the fall, and you're gonna have 1 action point less during winter, unless you already only have 1 or 2 action points. Once the players receive their action points for the turn, they start spending them to activate leaders on the board. To activate an area that contains a leader costs an action point. Areas without leaders, 2 action points. There are also some special leaders that will allow you to activate their area for free. This is the initial setup, or at least the main area of the initial setup, with the Athenian units, land units here advancing, some naval units here, and then Syracusan land and naval units there ready to defend. Players spend action points to move their units. At the end of movement, they have to spend an extra action point to declare attacks. They resolve attacks in all areas containing units of both sides, and players keep alternating impulses in which they spend action points until they both spend all their action points. At that point, you have the construction phase, a new thing here that was not in Sphacteria. There are different types of constructions that are already on the board at the beginning of the game or can be built during the game. There are the main fortified areas. One belongs to the Syracusan player. This fortified area here, this fortified wall here is already there at the beginning of the game. It is impassable to enemy units. The units just cannot get there, and also there is an unlimited stacking limit within that area, so very important to avoid attrition. The Athenian player does not have such an area. This line here only indicates an hypothetical area, but if you're playing the historical scenario, then in turn 1 you will be given the option of building your camp, the Athenian camp, and once the Athenian camp has been built, then this line here becomes reality, and the Athenian player also has an area which is impassable to the opponent. And there are other constructions that can be built. There are the forts that can be built in areas that allow that, And actually, just remember that that fort starts on the board at the beginning of the game on its Syracuse side, but there are other forts that can be built in empty locations. For example, in that one, you need to spend construction points and you need to have at least 2 points of combat strength present in the area. Also, the same is true for walls. In these locations here, you can build walls where there are those boxes, say 1, 2, 3. These are sections of the Athenian wall that can be built after the Athenian camp is built and starting from box 1. And these are sections of the potential Syracusan wall that can go 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, and 3. And if that section is built, then the Athenian player cannot build the last section of his wall. If the Athenian wall is built all the way, then this section cannot be built. To build a wall, you must have units in an area adjacent to the section of the wall that you're trying to build, and again, you need at least 2 points of strength. You also need to spend construction points that you receive by rolling dice. The Athenian player receives 2 dice by default, the Syracusan player 1 die by default. Other dice may be granted through several advantages. For example, during certain years, some players may receive 1 more or 1 less. The player with advantage has an extra die. You can burn special event markers without using their effects to receive a die, and you roll a die. For each 5 that you rolled, you receive 1 construction point. For each 6, you receive 2 construction points. To build a section of a wall costs 1 construction point. To build a camp or a fort, 2 construction points. And if you build a wall, you will place the wall marker with the arrow indicating the direction in which the wall is. With that marker there, now we know that that wall there exists, and then suppose that the Athenian player manages to build that, and then we have, well, a lot of walls there. Well, the wall is becoming longer and longer. Also, the Syracusan player has the option of building a special type of fortification, but that only if he has control of this fort here. Then he can build the chains which are placed here and block access to the port to the Athenian naval units, and of course that also has an effect on Athenian supplies. But why would you build the other things on the map? Well, the camp is mainly to have your defensive area here. Forts, if you have units in a fort, you can stack them there. The forts have specific stacking limits. Also, some forts may give you an advantage if the fort is friendly to you and the fort is in an area that is used for combat. This one, for example, will grant a double bonus. Walls will slow down the enemy because the enemy will take longer to move through a wall. Also, if you are defending behind a friendly wall, the opponent is going to have a penalty to attack you. After the construction phase, you're going to have a phase of adjustments that is extremely important. Players can place their units in any friendly fort in their original area or in the Catania base for the Athenian player, and those units are basically going to stay there to wait until next turn. If you do not place units in forts up to the stacking limit or your initial area or in the Catania base, then the units that are left outside will have to roll for attrition, and they may be reduced. On the other hand, during this phase, units that are left outside, so yes, they are at risk of suffering for attrition, and you have to roll a die to see whether they're reduced or not. But units that are left out there are doing the hard long-term work, which may include to destroy an enemy wall, If you have units on the two sides of an enemy wall, then you can roll a die. On a 3 or more, you destroy that section of the enemy wall. And this is also the phase in which you may launch sieges against the opponent. If you have units that are left out there between turns in an area that contains a fort, or the opponent with enemy units in that fort, then you also roll to see if you're able to take the fort. During the adjustment phase, you also check supply lines, and supplies are very important in this game. Each player starts with 3 supply points. The Athenian player loses a supply point if the chains are built. So if they are, the Athenian player may consider trying to destroy the chains, otherwise he'll be bleeding a supply point each turn. Another way in which the Athenian player can lose supply points is if the Syracusan player has more cavalry units deployed outside of the fortifications between turns. So on one hand, that is a way to cut supplies for the Athenians, well, for the Syracusan to the Athenians, but on the other hand, it exposes cavalry units of the Syracusan player to possible attrition. The Athenian player will force the opponent to lose a point of supply if all sections of the Athenian wall are built. So once those are built, the Syracusan player will definitely want to fight for position to get a chance of destroying these walls at the end of the turn before supplies are checked. But another way that the Athenian player has to cut Syracusan supplies is to end the turn occupying this area with land units, and then these 2 areas with naval units. If the Syracusan player goes down to 0 supply points, he loses the game. Immediately, Syracuse capitulates. This is not true for the Athenian player, who will have a lot of damage if his supplies go down to 0, but he will not lose the game. The Syracusan player also has a chance to win the game immediately during the game itself by reducing the Athenian fleet to 40 strength points or less, but that is not easy to achieve because the Athenian fleet is pretty strong. If neither of these instant victory conditions are met by the end of turn 9, then you check for end game victory conditions. Each player still has a chance of gaining a total victory based on control of fortifications on the map. If neither of the total victory conditions are met, then you count victory points, which are based on control of fortifications on the map and on elimination of enemy units. And at that point, you determine the winner. This game was enjoyable, much more so than Sphacteria. Actually, the game pretty much corrects all the things that I did not like too much in Sphacteria. Starting with the action points, now you have more control of your action points. There are more factors that can change the amount of action points. You feel less at the mercy of that initial die roll each turn, and that, of course, creates more interesting interaction when both players can actually execute several actions, or at least some actions in a turn. There are more units now. There is also cavalry, and that cavalry becomes part of the strategy about supplies. Terrain is more interesting. You have modifiers based on terrain that will affect movement and combat, and I just like the way in which they're set on the map. Also, those modifiers will change because new things may be built on the map as the game progresses and then being destroyed. So actually the map changes throughout the game. I really like that. The game certainly has several different phases, from the mad construction at the beginning of the game, then the defense of what you constructed, the attack on the opponents, fortifications, the possible fight for the strait that will allow the Syracusan player to build the chains. Things are tough for the Athenian player in the middle part of the game, as the Athenian player is outnumbered, and the Athenian player probably will want to keep the pressure up against the opponent, threatening to win the game thanks to some instant victory condition, and that will force the Syracusan player to split forces around. But it can be a little challenging for the Athenian player. If the Athenian player survives that, of course things are going to be better in the end, not completely reversed, because the Syracusan player will still have good chances of interfering with the advance of the of the Athenian reinforcements, but definitely there is an interesting interaction. And I just found that the games that they played ended fairly close. I think that both sides have a chance of winning the game if they figure out the best ways in which take advantage of the reinforcement schedule and the geography of the map and the way the victory conditions are set up. So this is a game that has interesting options, interesting challenges, and to me this is an enjoyable game. This is a magazine game that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the magazine kit came with it, and definitely this is a game that will convince me much more than Spectera did, and I hope to see more games made in this system in the future.